Shalom Israel. Today I'm going to attempt to excavate, examine the conception of Passover. As you well know, Jews all around the world have been celebrating Passover during this month of April. And similarly, Christians have also been celebrating Easter. So the two events are inextricably intertwined and joined at the hip. But today I'm gonna, focus more on the conception and the idea behind the celebration of Passover, which many of you know about, from some of our studies in high school, studying Christian religious knowledge. But in contemporary times, and to a large degree, even in classic times, the conception of Passover, has assumed, some, socio-political, elements to it. So as you can see, I'm doing this podcast on a stationary bike, and I'm doing it for a reason because I've consumed much more calories than I need during this festive period. Of course, you know that Passover is celebrated in Judaism, not observed. There are, certain Jewish rites, rituals, and routines that are observed, like Yom Kippur, the Holocaust Day, Purim. So many of these events are observed. They are not celebrated, but Passover is celebrated because it was during the event of Passover that God redeemed the children of Israel from the land of Egypt when Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, refused to acquiesce to Moses' demand to let the people of Israel go. So so God released a series of punishments against the Egyptians, from plagues, from locusts, from blood on the Nile, to the demise of the first male-born children of Egypt. So in order to just give a little background about Passover, I started by just letting you know that Passover is to be celebrated. So so lamb, all the families slaughtered lamb, and the blood of the lamb was to be primed over the door of the homes and houses of the children of Israel, so that when the death, the agent of death, comes knocking, it will pass over those doors that have a sprinkling of the lamb, of the blood of the lamb. And of course, in Christianity too, the lamb, has its own important, connotation, because it's through the lamb that Christians, have been redeemed. So, so for over 3,500 years ago, that this event took place, the children of Israel were in a between a rock and a hard place. For some reason, the devil hardened the heart of Pharaoh and wouldn't let them go until the series of unfortunate incidents and events began to occur, sweep through the land of Egypt. That a collection of those events forced the hand of Pharaoh in letting the children of Israel return to the promised land. Many Igbo Jews today, Igbo Jews, Hebrews, and Israelites, I like to use those three, interchangeably conceptions, because a lot of people have, expressed umbrage and, some concerns the way in which I describe Igbos as Jews. And they have consistently, protested against this characterization. So today I'm going to be, using the the ideas of and the nouns of Jews, Hebrews, and Israelites. Because there are still a lot of Igbos who like to see themselves as Jews, while others like to see themselves as Hebrews, others simply want to see themselves as Israelites. So as Igbos celebrate Passover during this period, it's important for us to also remember that it's not completely and totally Passover for us, because we're still in bondage as Jews. We have not been redeemed, we're still trapped in a foreign land. We're still trapped in Babylon, until the day we, get redeemed by God, then we can fully, completely, and totally celebrate Passover. So I just, I just wanted to slide that in, that Passover within the Igbo Jewish community must be celebrated with some restraint, some restrictions and some reservations, because we still being trapped in some socioeconomic inequities. These socioeconomic inequities in Nigeria, have at one time or the other prompted some fundamentally existential rhetorical resistance from the cross-section of Igbos, both in Nigeria and the diaspora. So, every time you go to the internet or social media, the social media space is, abuzz with a lot of videos produced by Igbos, decrying and condemning, the way, the level of imbalance, injustice, that still exists in Nigeria after almost over 50 years of independence. So when we, because I've been meandering through social media, and I've seen Igbos, releasing a lot of photographs of their different Jewish congregations celebrating Passover as if they have experienced firsthand the event of Passover. But I just wanted to remind the Igbos to continue to seek the face of Hashem, Adonai, Yahweh. I don't know what you call your own God, because I'm not here to establish my own narrow conception of God. So people have their own ideas about who their God is. People go into synagogues, into churches, to look for the God that understands the internal dynamics of their suffering. So, sometimes they refer to him as, Adonai, sometimes they refer to him as Yahweh, sometimes they refer to him as Elohim, sometimes they refer to him as El Shaddai. So it's just, nobody's going to impose their own, arbitrary conception of God. So, but as you continue to seek his face in humility, to, come to, the rescue of our people, so that we can have a true democracy. The uncritical, valorization of democracy in terms of its ideals and practices is something that must continue to be interrogated, because people are promoting, propagating, and pushing democracy as progressive, self-reliant, conception that is built into it, social and restorative justice, elements. That nothing can be further from the truth. Even in well-developed countries, democracy still has its drawbacks. So it's not like it's an entirely, perfect system of government, particularly in our own country, where democracy, even after over 20 years of the existence of the Second Republic, is still, still has too many challenges, surrounding democracy. So our democratic experimentation, needs to be reworked, needs to be reformed, to offer our people, a sense of self-reliance, a sense of, nationalism, a sense of love for the country. Because if you go to social media, you're gonna see, dissonance. It's like a season of discontent. A lot of Nigerians are just expressing, a lot of dissatisfaction, a lot of dissonance about our, democratic experiment. So, the idea that, oh, well, Nigeria is a democratic country and everything is perfect is, like missing the point. So it's important for us to continue to attempt to, rearrange our democratic, democratic, principles to align or line up with international norms. The last presidential election that took place, and by extension other elections, into the governorship office, into different houses of parliament, have, been so, people have been so vociferous in their condemnation of that election. There's a presidential candidate right now who is in court, trying to use all the leverages within his disposal to ensure that he is declared the winner. So you can see that every time there is an election, people will always complain. So there's gotta be something, something wrong with this picture, in which every time election is concluded, people tend to, have disagreements. They tend to have some kind of grudge or an axe to grind regarding the outcome of the process. So that, in of itself, tells you that our democratic experimentation has plenty of room for improvement. No democratic society is perfect, but you gotta have a certain threshold that can approximate something that is going to be acceptable, to a large segment of the society. But when the bar is set so low that there is complaint, there is visible case of unfairness, visible cases of injustice in the system. Of course, people are bound to interrogate that process. So as we celebrate Passover today, which was first celebrated over 3,500 years ago, as the children of Egypt, children of Israel, I might say, were preparing to exit the land of Egypt after approximately 400 years of slavery. Our forefathers were there. And how do you know that Igbo forefathers were there? Because they were very vociferous in their challenge of the way Moses handled his encounter with Pharaoh. He wasn't as forceful as he should have been. The first time he approached Pharaoh, he had all the leverage and blessing of God, but he didn't leverage it. He didn't leverage all the authority that was given to him by God. As he had an encounter with Pharaoh, he went there to beg Pharaoh as if he didn't have the authority of God. So that's why the process of exodus from the land of Egypt was an all drawn out one, which shouldn't have been so if he had provided leadership. And the people that were in the forefront of the interrogation and the challenge to Moses' patriarchy were the Igbo forefathers. Because you know how we are. We're gonna tell it as it is, as we are telling Nigeria the truth, because we love our country so much to tell it the truth. That is patriotism. It's different from nationalism. Nationalism is the uncritical valorization of one's country's, visions, virtues, and values, regardless of his moral arc and trajectory. Whereas patriotism is the celebration of one's country in the light of his best virtues, values, and visions. So those are the two distinguishing elements of between nationalism and patriotism. So Igbo people have used their bully pulpit. They have used their leverage of rhetoric resistance to challenge the Nigerian authorities to do the right thing, to create balance in the in our democratic experimentation, so that all citizens across the board can get a fair shake from a country that has been endowed and blessed with so much. And it's just very, very disheartening that despite our enormous natural resources, I understand there is a place they are fighting over gold. I didn't even know Nigeria had gold in Zamfara State. I don't know all the full details, but it just goes to underscore that we are not a monolithic or a single dimensional country. We have gold, we have bauxite, we have tin, we have coal, we have arable agricultural land, we have livestock, we have finally and ultimately crude oil, natural gas. Now I was watching and then we yet only probably 2 to 3, 4% of Nigerians are at the top of the food chain. They are at the top of the hierarchy. They are the ones who possess the power and in the power of patriarchy to determine what trickles down to the rest of the other 90, 95, 96%. It shouldn't be like that. There should be some kind of balance. I was just watching a video, a short video clip on internet. I think it was on Facebook, because I get most of my inspiration from the social media. I think a black dude was interviewing somebody who clearly looked Arabian. He looks like he's from the Middle East. He's from Dubai. And then he was, it was like a comparative analysis between Dubai and Nigeria, two countries that are unequal, because Dubai is a small country and is a single product country that they only have crude oil, not even as much as Nigeria. So the individual was, clearly articulating the views that he was postulating and positing the idea that it has nothing to do with the level of or the amount of natural resources a country is endowed with. It has to do more with leadership. And he was saying that the Nigerian situation is very, very heartbreaking. That there is no leadership in Nigeria. And he's a Muslim, but he was saying it as it is. He was telling it as it is. That Nigeria has not been blessed with leadership. But as much as Dubai has been blessed with leadership, in the person of His Majesty, I think Al Maktoum is the king of Dubai. Now, Dubai is a choice destination for the Nigerian elite. That's where they want to go and and squander and splash and spend their money, because the country has been built up from the scratch. It was like a fishing town, old fishing town, and they did a lot of work to preserve their classic heritage, so that the classic and the contemporary can intermingle in a way that is extraordinary. So the gentleman made a very, very important point that leadership is a sine qua non. Leadership is a very important ingredient to progress. Even though democracy has been described as the epicenter of progress, if there is no leadership to propel democracy, is going to be no more than shifting sand. So I thought the comparison analysis that individual offered is between Nigeria and Dubai is a classic case in contrast, where two countries endowed with the same amount of natural resources. We're not even talking about human resources. Nigeria is a country of almost 200 million and still growing. Dubai's population is not even half as much as that of Nigeria, even with a lot of foreign, expatriate workers helping to, boost its economy. So Nigeria has a lot of intellectual resources, human capital, a lot of doctors, a lot of engineers, a lot of economists, but yet, this kind of leverage does not reflect in the kind of progress that we expect our Nigeria to make in terms of economic progress, in terms of security, stability, in terms of socioeconomic balance and equity. Nigerians lack leadership. Leadership is very, very important. Until we get the kind of leadership that is going to propel our economy to be at its best, we will continue to go around in circle and in cycle. It's like a shot in the dark. You don't know what's ahead of you. That's exactly the kind of analysis that will seem appropriate when describing Nigeria in terms of its leadership structure. Until we get our leadership right, the individual was straight. He was right on the money when he posited that when he postulated that Dubai is better than Nigeria because of leadership. We could have been better than Dubai because we have much more than Dubai in terms of oil and gas, coal, gold, bauxite, human capital. The citizens of Dubai are not as educated as Nigerians. If you go to North America, there's no place you're not going to find the Igbos engaged in one preoccupation, in one career or the other, helping those countries make progress. So North Americans' gain is Nigerians' loss. And then when you go to college, in North America and acquire all the competencies and cognitions that can really make a difference in a country, you come back to Nigeria, you're treated like a pariah. Pariah means like an outcast. Somebody, you're treated like a persona non grata because people think you're coming to displace them. And I've heard that many of the elite people in authority reserve positions for their children who are studying overseas so that when they come, they take up those positions. So if that's why a lot of people, when they leave Nigeria, they'd rather stay where they are. Even if they're cleaning toilets and doing many jobs, they do that with dignity than being in Nigeria where your competencies and cognitions are not recognized, even though they know that those competencies and cognitions are what nations need to build up their capacity. Israel is one of the technologically advanced countries in the world because they opened up their arms to every Jew around the world to come to Israel, to bring their competencies, to bring their cognitions, their expertise, their experiences in every area of human endeavor, in agriculture, in biotechnology, in medicine, in high tech. So Israel, apart from Silicon Valley in California, is another, one of the foremost tech hubs around the world because the people understand how economies work. They have asked economists to run their national planning sector. Nigeria lacks this this kind of important idea. Nigeria doesn't know how to put a round peg in a round hole. They rather bring somebody who is a non-entity, who is clueless about national planning. The United States got it right from the start. That's why in the Federal Reserve System, it's mostly Jews that are appointed Federal Reserve Chairman. And there is a reason for that. Because Jews are known for their extraordinary talent in being prudential and judicious with capital. They know how to deploy capital. They know how to deploy the means of production so that it can, leverage the economy. When Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was the Minister of National Planning, and I think she doubled as Minister of Finance, you can tell that the economy of Nigeria was at its best because somebody who is in a leadership position got it right, that we need to appoint this Igbo person. Every time you appoint an Igbo person in the national planning sector or the central bank sector, the economy, is jolted up. It jolts up. It jumps. It's jump started right away. But when you begin to appoint people based on criteria that have nothing to do with expertise, cognition and competencies, you're going to be going around and around the circle and the cycle. So every time Americans appoint experts to their Federal Reserve, they appoint Jews, because Jews from the start know how to work money. They know how to quadruple money, and the Jews have this leverage. When they were studying under different rabbis, under different scribes, scholars in the synagogues. There was a time there were no schools, there were no universities, there were no colleges, there were no spaces of learning in this world. But Jews were going to synagogues, and they were being taught how to manage money, how to replicate money, how to use money, how to make money beget money. So until Nigeria recognizes the special talent of the Igbos in terms of money management, we will continue to be just groping around in the dark. And to give you a concrete example, at the end of the Civil War in 1970, Igbos, not all the families, because it's a misnomer to claim that every Igbo family received 20 pounds. They are well over 20 pounds. That's not true. Especially the Igbos that lived in the rural areas. My father never received 20 pounds, even though my father had millions of pounds in Barclays Bank in Aba, because he used to take me to Barclays Bank in Aba, and he had millions of pounds in a Standard Bank in Zaria. That's where he had his major, business outlet. All that money was confiscated by the federal government. Every Igbo that was a millionaire, every Igbo that had millions of pound sterling, before the war, lost that money. So, in a sense, Nigeria still needs to pay tithe to the Church of Conscience for holding on to Igbo assets. And I consider that money that is being saved up, because when Hitler took the money that belonged to the Jews, their grandchildren had to go and collect all the wealth back. So after 1970, some Igbos, not all the Igbo families received this 20 pound derisory award. Many Igbo families didn't receive it. My own family didn't receive it. But they started from scratch, and then they built their businesses with their bare hands. And they have sustained the momentum up to this day. So what does that tell you? It tells you that some people are endowed. Some, some cultures, have some special gift and talent to know how to leverage money. No matter how little. Some communities, some cultures, some tribes have the special skill and competencies to make money work for them. And that's about leadership too. Because if you can build a transportation business from nothing to one that is a thriving business that transports people not just across Nigeria, but across West Africa and even Africa, if you can build an importation business from nothing that imports most of the goods that Nigeria needs for its economic development, then there's got to be reason to believe that God blesses cultures and communities differently. The Igbos straddle every section of the Nigerian economy, from transportation, from trading, from core importation, to construction, to real estate, to oil and gas. There is no segment of the economy that you don't find Igbos. And it's because of this spread of Igbo investment in different areas of the Nigerian economy that has actually kept the Nigerian economy, humming. So if the Nigerian government after the war allowed, kept its sentiment at bay, they would have restored the money that Igbos had in the banks in order to spur up, in order to jolt or jumpstart the post-war economy. Because after the war, Nigeria spent all its money, all its oil revenues in importing arms to subdue the Igbos. So if there was leadership after the war, they would have, knowing fully well that Igbos have special talent. Igbos have special competencies and cognitions in terms of leadership, in terms of management of resources. They would have allowed the Igbos to, they would have returned all the Igbo assets, all their money, particularly liquid assets, in order for them to do what they do best, promoting, propagating and pushing the economic development of nations. They have done that in every place they go to. The Igbo contribution, economic contribution to the national economy is of the countries where they are, both at the micro and macro level, is quite phenomenal. Micro means small businesses. The spending that families, small businesses, encounter or engage in, while at the macro level is the totality of all the goods and services that the national government and other big players in the economy, expand in the economy. So that's the difference between the micro and macro economic indices. So it's important to remember that if there was leadership, and that's one thing that we have lacked in Nigeria. I'm sure somebody gave somebody that advice that return all the Igbo liquid assets in order for the economy to be jump-started, because we know how to deploy money. We have that talent, we have that gift, and we thank God that He gave us that gift and cognition. If the social economic inequities in Nigeria, the persistent, I might add, socio-economic inequities in Nigeria have been kept at bay. Those socio-economic inequities that have had fundamental and inimical consequences on Igbo, financial, progress have been kept at bay. Nigerian economy would have, been as equal, if not more than that of Dubai and other areas where, people, countries are making real progress. Dubai is not better than Nigeria in terms of resources, but they're better in terms of leadership. So I just wanted to make that important point during this season of Passover. Passover again is the season when the children of Israel were redeemed. They were rescued and released from their torment, their slavery in the land of Egypt after 400 years. So they had to celebrate Passover. And then there are some artifacts that we celebrate Passover with. You gotta have your masa. Masa is like unleavened bread, because the children of Israel left in such a hurry that they didn't allow the bread to rise. They had to just eat it like that. So that's why during the season of Passover, we have to celebrate it with unleavened bread or masa, just like a cabin biscuit. And then we'll have to also, celebrate with 5 cups of wine. It doesn't mean that one person has to drink all the 5 cups of wine, but it has its own symbol, signification. It has its own symbolism, signification, and other very important aspects to it. And then also, you have to eat a special, tom-tom, special, diet. From the research I conducted about Passover, it's like you're not supposed to, be interacting with any form of grain, rice, beans or anything that has, grain in it, like even bread. You gotta put them aside and just enjoy Passover, meal during this, very important, event. It's a celebration. It's not you can celebrate it, you can also observe it. But Passover is a time of joy when, people, the children of Israel were rescued from the land of Egypt. So as Igbo Jews are celebrating Passover, please celebrate it with some, restraint. Celebrate it with some reservation, because it's still not yet Passover for us. We still have a lot of work to do in order to free our mind, free ourselves from the clutches of tyranny, socio-economic inequity and inequality, from social injustice that has been persisting in the land. So that's what Hashem has asked me to share with you today as I walk away some of the calories that I consumed during this Passover on this stationary bike. I've been able to walk myself into some sweat. That's what I want, so that I can be able to release a lot of the calories that I consumed today. Another issue that kind of weighs heavily on my mind is the question that somebody asked online. The individual was asking why the Igbo Jewish Forum is not inextricably intertwined with the Biafran struggle. If we cannot allow the two components of our podcast, or of our forum, or of our family to be articulated in tandem, the issue of Biafra and the issue of Igbo Jewish identity, then it's of no use even coming online or on the internet to even make these videos that I'm making. And I had to say that, to him that, there are so many, fora, there are so many organizations, so many public, public groups on Facebook that, target the issue of Biafra. That's how they do, just to propagate and, promote the sovereignty of Biafra. People might, access those groups. There are so many areas to Igbo national life. It's not just Biafra. I chose to, push, propagate, promote the issue of Igbo return to the religion of our forefathers, which is Judaism. That's where God has called me. I was ordained a pastor. They foisted it on me because they saw my gift, they saw my talent, they saw my competencies and cognitions, and they say, hey, you have leadership quality, we're going to make you a pastor. But over the years, my heart, has never been there. My heart has, excuse me, I got hiccup. My heart has always been, somewhere else. Until God gave me an epiphany that this is where my heart is to cause an ingathering, bring my people together, bring the children of Chukwukabiama together so that they can practice the religion of their forefathers, which is Judaism. So that's where my competencies are. If you want to deploy my competencies to any other area, I might be quite ineffective. I think Nnamdi Kanu is doing a good job there. He doesn't need a competition. But this is where God has called me. He has called me as a priest, as a high priest on my art, because it's important to slide in that adjective high. As a high priest, that adjective is very important. I want to be consistent with the assignment that Hashem has given me, the call Elohim has placed over my life, to continue to articulate this program of ingathering of the exiles. So that's where my assignment lies, is to teach Igbos the few things I know about Judaism. So we of course we still rely on the axiom, and the aphorism and the maxim of each one reach one, each one teach one, each one give one. So I'm leveraging the area of my a strong comparative advantage, which is to teach. I'm an educator by profession, by training, by experience. I've always spent my time educating other people's children. So this is something I love doing, coming on Facebook or other social media space, just to articulate some of the cognitions, some of the experiences that I have, some of the education that I've acquired over the years, so that it can benefit people out there. And this is a labor of love. It's something that I enjoy doing. It's altruistic, It's nothing that is self-serving or self-condescending. It's something that I want to, leverage, toward helping people understand some of the, gray areas in Judaism. I'm still learning, because I committed myself to as a lifelong learner. So I'm still learning, but every time I, get information that I think will be beneficial to Igbo Jews, I'm gonna readily, disseminate that information for the interest of our, Jewish Hebrew Israelite brothers who are re-emerging, into Judaism, into the religion of our forefathers, and some Israeli rabbis are gonna be, they're gonna enroll me in a program, very important program, that I'm gonna be learning halakha. Halakha is some of the rules, some of the routines, some of the rites, rituals of Judaism. In terms of how we dress, everything has to do with dressing. It's just like in Passover, the meal is called seder, which is order. Everything has to be in order. As Jews, we are slaves to order. And then, most of our democratic experimentations have failed because of lack of order. So order is very, very important. So they're going to be teaching me the conception of halakha, in terms of what we eat as Igbo Jews, the way we cook it, the way we slaughter our animals, the way we interact with our females. So those are some of the things they're going to be teaching me. I know that our forefathers knew these things, but it's been a long time that we have not practiced Judaism. We've been in the church. So it's important for us to go and relearn some of these rituals, some of these rites and routines that we have not encountered for thousands of years. So as they enroll me into that program, and they'll be teaching me, I'll be attending the classes and taking the classes. I will also be sharing some of the strategies, some of the norms, some of the mores, some of the halakha rules that I've learned, so that we can practice Judaism in the way it ought to be practiced. I'm not saying that the way Igbos practice Judaism has to align or be in tandem with the way others practice it, but there is something that is universal about Judaism. It can be doing something entirely different from what the norm or what the ethos and the ethics of Judaism have promulgated. So I just wanted to slide that in, that in due course I'm going to be taking this halakha class. It's very, very important. It's not conversion, of course Igbos are not converts, nobody's converting anybody, but it's a chance for me to learn some of the things that I do not know. I have nothing to do with my the locks of my hair. The locks of my hair have nothing to do with it. People have been calling me Rastafarian. They call me this, they call me that. I'm not a Rastafarian. I just wanted to wear a new look as a high priest, because the prophet wrote it in the book of Numbers. He said, as for the high priest, no razor shall be upon his head, because his head has been consecrated by God. So there will be no razor on my head until God speaks otherwise. So, but that doesn't make me a Rastafarian. And I like Rastafarians. I like reggae music. I like Bob Marley. I like Peter Tosh. I like Uroy. I like Iroy. I like Freddie McGregor. I like all of them. And I like all kinds of music. I'm not single dimensional when it comes to music. I like jazz. I like country music. I like Igbo Afro rock. Especially music of the 70s, like Black Children, Apostles of Abba, One Word, Rinka's Experience, Founders 15. Hey man, I like all those kind of music. I still play them in my iPod. So this is what Hashem has asked me to speak about today. This Passover intertwined with some social analysis. Social analysis is the systematic deconstruction of social issues in order to prompt and promote a change regarding the phenomenon that is being discussed. So, and then one more thing that I need to also express is the issue of people allowing those who are not Igbos to claim the same Jewish rights like Igbos. I think I mentioned it in my last video. It's important for me to repeat some of the things I did in the previous videos, because the reason why advertisers advertise their products over and over again, and they use this in-your-face strategy as if you're deaf, is because sometimes information will go into one ear and then out the other. So it's important for me to rehash what I did in the previous video about the way in which a lot of non-Igbos are finding their ways into our synagogues. And I've been told that many of them cause a lot of problems. They cause problems, as they exit the synagogue, because they are not Jews. So that's why they can come there and act any kind of way. So even though we don't want to make our synagogues exclusive preserve of the Igbos, but the Igbos have the leadership position in those synagogues. And those people may come there as long as they make contributions toward the sustenance of the synagogues. They have to pay their tzedakah, tithe. Now I'm using the word tithe because I have updated my information regarding tithes, but not in the way pastors articulate the process. They try to make their churches look like they make themselves look like CEOs, chief executive officers. They turn their churches into chamber of commerce. But our synagogues will not wear that same toga. Our synagogues will not become a chamber of commerce synagogues. But synagogues need money to operate, to buy some of the artifacts, to pay the bills, to feed the rabbi or the cantor or the worship leader, to take care of his children, to buy him a car, to build him a house or put him in a decent accommodation so that he can devote his time and energy to the service of the people. Because as Levites, people from the tribe of Aaron, from Aaron, the brother of Moses, They were not supposed to own property. They were not supposed to own land. Their investment is in the synagogue. So, so anybody coming into the synagogue, whether you're an Igbo or non-Igbo, you must have to come with resources to support your local synagogues. Because I have been looking at some of the synagogues that have been in existence for quite some time. It doesn't seem to me that there's much progress going on there. They still worship in spaces that don't even have a ceiling. They have a corrugated iron roof, but no ceiling. So the place must be very, very hard and inhospitable. So people need to start bringing out their money. You were bringing out your money in the churches. When you were in the church, you were promoting the pastor, buying him cars, paying him 10% of your earnings. You should do much more in your synagogue because this is your own. You have to claim ownership to the synagogue. You have to claim ownership over the synagogue than you did in the church. In the church, you were just, it was a passing glance. You were just, passing through. You had no investment in the church, even though the pastor forced you to give up all your, wealth so that he can expand the wheelbase of his SUV. So you should do that to the rabbi, to your cantor, to your worship leader, as you go into that synagogue. You want to make your synagogue, the synagogue of all eyes. You don't want to make your synagogue look like a place that people don't even want to go back a second time. So I know we're just getting started, but it's good to think ahead regarding the way we must, see our own synagogue. That's our own space. We need to promote it. We need to, make it shine like the Igbo shoe. So it's important for me to reiterate this. I said it before, but I needed to say it again so that people can understand their responsibilities as well as the rights they have as Igbo Jews, Hebrews, and Israelites when they go into synagogues. And those of them who are not Igbos, they must have to face conversion in one way or the other. They're going to be converted. Otherwise, they're going to just be wasting their time in those synagogues. And Igbos, do not allow other tribes to wrestle the leadership of synagogues from your hand. I don't care how much money they have. Don't make that mistake so that they will take over a synagogue and start, denigrating and desecrating the house of Hashem, Elohim, and Adonai. The synagogue is not a church, even though both of them are, inextricably intertwined, because the first church that was established in Jerusalem was populated by Jews. So you can see the degree to which Judaism and Christianity, are inextricably intertwined and, joined at the hip. But it's important that, and if you go to a synagogue that, in an interesting sort of way, established by somebody who is not the Igbo, take that synagogue from them because they don't belong there. You gotta take the leadership of that synagogue and push them to the side so that they can go find their place in the back of the room, because synagogues are synonymous with Igbo. Igbos are the Jews. There was a time we were being referred to as the Jews of the West Africa, but then they saw that it's much more than that. They started referring to us as Jews of Africa. Now we are the Jews of the world. Don't accept, that nomenclature of Jews of Africa. What does that really mean? Jews of Africa, where Igbos are all over the world. There are more Igbos in the diaspora than you can find in some, towns and villages. So Igbos of the world. So we're Jews of the world because we're all over the place. For Anglo-Saxon Jews to even invite me to one of their ceremonies, shows that this is not a joke. We're being taken seriously, but it takes time. We're not asking for, affirmation or recognition because people are so, worried about recognition. So what are you going to do with it if you're recognized? Recognized of what? What you already are. It's obvious that our forefathers were Jews, or Hebrews or Israelites. So we don't need anybody's recognition, but we need people to embrace us. We want people to interact with us because you can't live in a vacuum. You can't live in a cocoon. Okay, the world is it's not a single dimensional or monolithic space. It's a place where there is interdependence. There's, people gotta interact with one another, so you can learn best practices. You can, exchange ideas. That's why we are reaching out to Anglo-Saxon, Jews. Many of whom are very, very respectful, very, very considerate, and very, very sensitive, about people's, religious, choices. I'm not going to condemn every Anglo-Saxon as being anti-Igbo, Jew. Many of them, say, yeah, the only problem is that we want you people to learn halakha. If people learn halakha, then the level of enthusiasm that Anglo-Saxon Jews have been expressing about Igbo Jewish reemergence will be elevated if you guys learn halakha, how to observe Jewish laws. And I don't think that's a bridge too far. I don't think they're asking for too much. If you want to, if you're a Christian, depending on your denomination, the pastor is going to require of you to observe part of the liturgy that is, that is consistent with the doctrines and dogma of that particular denomination. So that's not like asking for too much. Oh, my battery. My battery almost went out. But so I'm gonna bring this video or podcast. I'm not a vlogger. This is not a vlog. Only women do vlogging. They travel to different places. They show their nails. They show off their nice outfits. I'm not a vlogger. I produce podcasts. I'm a socio-cultural critic. I engage in social analysis of phenomena. Like Passover, interlaced with some social, political issues in Nigeria in particular and around the world in general. So, but I'm very happy that you tuned into this podcast. And as I'm getting ready to close, I'm going to remind you to continue to go to synagogue and support your synagogue. Bring your friends. Join Igbo Jewish Forum. I'm one of the co-conveners of Igbo Jewish Forum, where we interact with one another, where we exchange ideas, videos, artifacts, so that we'll continue to learn more about Judaism until such a time when we become proficient in the subject matter. Until I come your way again, this is your high priest bringing you word. Shalom.